surviving the death penalty, stories of convicts who lived through their own executions. Capital punishment might sound like something from the Middle Ages, but it's still legal in about half the world's countries, even if it's only carried out in 53. But even executions don't always go as planned. In the past, executions in Europe were mostly done by beheading. How well this worked depended on the executioner's skill, and they didn't always hit the right spot. Mary, Queen of Scots, is said to have been a victim of a nervous executioner, sentenced to death in 1587 for supposedly helping Catholic rebels. It took 3 tries to behead her. The first blow only wounded her with the blunt side of the axe. To make things worse, when the executioner tried to lift her bleeding head, he forgot he was wearing a wig and the head rolled away. Unlike a person, a machine offered a more dependable and less painful death, so it was seen as more humane than the axe. Dr. Guillotine himself was against the death penalty. He believed a quick and reliable device could be the first step towards ending it. It wasn't until 1981 that France outlawed executions, thanks to President François Mitterrand. Even less reliable than beheading was hanging. Hanging cuts off oxygen to the brain, and it's actually the lack of blood flow, not choking, that usually causes death. How hanging works depends on the knot. If it's right under the chin, it can sometimes break the second and third neck bones, which then pierce the spinal cord. In that case, the person dies instantly. If it's just cutting off blood to the brain, death takes 4 minutes or more, even though the heart can keep beating after the brain is too far gone to save. When death happens is a matter of definition. In judicial hangings, death is declared when the heart stops, which can take over 15 minutes. Sometimes a person would wake up after being cut down. This happened to Anna Green, a British maid accused of killing a baby in 1650. No one noticed she was still faintly breathing when she was put in her coffin, and they found a pulse the next day. The 22-year-old was then set free. John Smith, a London thief nicknamed Half-Hanged Smith, also became infamous. After 15 minutes on the gallows, the crowd begged for mercy, and Smith was cut down alive. He apparently didn't learn his lesson, because he went back to crime, ended up in court 2 more times, and was finally deported in 1727. Half-hanging, where a person is hanged until they almost stop breathing and pass out, was used as a form of torture. For obvious reasons, people didn't always survive. A new way to execute people came about in the late 1800s. The electric chair, used only in the United States and a few times in the Philippines in the 1900s. The idea probably came from accidents with electricity, which was just starting to be used in homes. In August 1881, a dock worker in Buffalo, New York, George Lemuel Smith, died after touching a large electrical generator. A dentist, Alfred P. Southwick, heard about it and thought this could be used for something. After testing on dogs, he figured out how much electricity was needed for a more humane way to execute people than hanging. And he designed a special chair, like a dentist's chair. The very first execution using Southwick's invention, witnessed by lots of reporters, didn't go well. The condemned man, William Kemmler, a murderer, withstood 1,000 volts for 17 seconds in August 1890. When they turned off the power, he was still breathing. So the doctor ordered them to turn it back on, this time with twice the voltage. The blood vessels under his skin burst. He started bleeding, and some witnesses said he caught fire. The New York Times reported that a terrible odor began to permeate the death chamber, and the hair under and around the electrode on the head and the flesh under and around the electrode at the base of the spine began to singe. The odor was unbearable. Some people reportedly had to leave the room because they felt sick. The whole thing took 8 minutes, and reporters said of this supposed revolution in capital punishment, they would have done better with an axe. By 2020, the US had carried out over 4,300 executions by electric chair. 84, or almost 2%, went wrong, according to the Death Penalty Information Center. In 1953, Ethel and Julius Rosenberg, convicted of spying for the Soviet Union, were executed in the electric chair. Julius died on the first try, but Ethel was still alive after 3 jolts, and it took 2 more to kill her. Even today, executions still have a high failure rate. despite new methods designed to make the process more humane and reliable. The US Constitution says prisoners shouldn't suffer during execution, but that's not always the case. In recent times, the media has reported several incidents of botched lethal injections. For instance, in 2014, convicted double murderer Joseph Rudolph Wood died over the course of 1 hour and 57 minutes, reportedly gasping for air the entire time. Authorities have pointed to the use of new, untested pharmaceuticals as a potential cause, which they had to resort to after major drug manufacturers, particularly from Europe, pledged not to supply American prisons with substances intended for executions. One of the condemned inmates survived the administration of the lethal cocktail. 57-year-old Kenneth Eugen Smith was scheduled to be executed by lethal injection in December 2022. However, after being strapped to the execution gurney, officials failed to insert the IV lines into his arm or to inject the needle under his collarbone. Smith's lawyers claimed that the authorities tortured him for hours and subjected him to severe mental anguish from the botched execution. The prison administration subsequently called off the execution, and Alabama Governor Kay Ivey decided to temporarily halt executions in the state. Smith himself filed a lawsuit against the state of Alabama and requested that the prison choose a different method for the next attempt. Last January, he was successfully executed using nitrogen, a completely new execution method first introduced that year in 4 states in the USA as a secondary option to lethal injection. According to Amnesty International, at least 1,153 executions were carried out in 16 countries in 2023. The 5 countries with the most executions were Iran, at least 853, Saudi Arabia, 172, Somalia, 38, the USA, 24, and Iraq, 16. This total doesn't include the thousands of executions believed to have happened in China, where execution data is a state secret, and other countries like Afghanistan, North Korea, Palestine, Syria, and Vietnam. Electrocution might not be bloody, but it's definitely not peaceful. Electrodes soaked in salt water are attached to the head and leg of the prisoner, who is strapped to a wooden chair. Then, alternating current at 500 to 2,300 volts, it varies by state, is sent through the body. After about 30 seconds, the power is turned off, and this is repeated until the execution team says the person is dead. The electrodes burn the skin, and there's a smell of burning flesh. The prisoner might catch fire. They might vomit, bleed from their eyes, nose, and ears, or even have their eyeballs pop out. Lethal injection, also invented in the US, usually uses 3 chemicals. First, pentobarbital or sodium thiopental makes the person fall asleep in seconds. Next, pancuronium bromide, a muscle relaxant, paralyzes the muscles and stops breathing. Finally, potassium chloride stops the heart. Different states use different mixes. Arizona and Ohio, for example, replace thiopental with midazolam, a sedative, and hydromorphone, a painkiller. What do you think about the death penalty today? Tell us in the comments if you support or oppose it, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you're the first to see our new videos. Thanks for watching.